When billionaire Evelyn Carter visited her late son's grave on a quiet Sunday morning, she expected silence, not the sight that froze her heart. A young black waitress sat beside the tombstone, tears falling as a little boy clung to her dress, and the flowers she carried matched the ones Evelyn brought every year. Who was she? And why did the boy have her son's same green eyes? Within moments, Evelyn's world began to crumble, as a hidden truth buried for years clawed its way to the surface. A story of guilt, class, and a mother's shocking discovery that money can't bury the past. Watch till the end. The secret she uncovers will leave you speechless. Evelyn Carter had everything the world could offer: wealth, power, prestige. Her last name opened doors in politics, fashion, and philanthropy. Newspapers once called her the woman who could buy stars and name them after herself. Yet despite her glittering empire, her heart had been carved hollow the day her only son, Daniel Carter, died in a tragic car accident 5 years ago. Every year, on the same date, she visited his grave alone. No bodyguards, no press, no assistants, just her son's favorite lilies, and the quiet breeze that whispered through the marble cemetery. To the world, she was a symbol of success. But behind those diamond earrings and designer coats was a mother still haunted by the sound of her child's laughter that would never return. She had built an entire foundation in his name, the Daniel Carter Hope Fund, dedicated to helping orphaned children. But even that, deep down, was less about charity and more about penance. There were moments when Evelyn wondered whether her obsession with empire building had stolen time from her son, time she could never buy back. That morning, she left her mansion before dawn, her chauffeur instructed to wait outside the cemetery gates. She wanted solitude. Dressed in a long black coat, she walked through the mist-covered grass, clutching the lilies close to her chest. The marble path beneath her heels echoed through the silence, each step reminding her of the weight of loss she had learned to carry with grace. The cemetery was empty, or so she thought, until she saw her. Near Daniel's grave, a woman sat on the ground holding a small boy who couldn't have been older than 4. Her uniform, a faded waitress apron, was smudged with dirt, and her trembling hands clutched a bunch of white lilies identical to Evelyn's. Her shoulders shook as she cried quietly, unaware that anyone was watching. For a moment, Evelyn froze. She wasn't angry, just confused. People didn't visit this grave. Her son's death had been highly publicized, the resting place secured in a private area. Only close family and authorized staff could enter. Yet here was a stranger, mourning as if she'd lost someone of her own. Evelyn took a cautious step forward. The child turned first, his wide, innocent eyes locking onto hers. Green eyes, sharp and familiar, piercing through the fog of memory like sunlight through storm clouds. Evelyn's breath caught. Her knees weakened. Those were Daniel's eyes. Her mind immediately rejected the thought. Impossible, absurd. She had buried her son. He had no children. Daniel had died single, or so she believed. He had been a busy young executive, preparing to inherit the Carter Corporation. How could this child possibly bear his features? Evelyn's eyes flicked to the woman, young, maybe in her mid-20s, exhausted but graceful even in grief. Her dark skin glowed faintly under the morning light, and there was something in her expression, love, guilt, and sorrow all twisted together, that made Evelyn's heart constrict painfully. She wanted to ask who she was, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she stood there in silence, hidden behind a marble angel statue, watching as the woman wiped her tears and whispered something to the boy. The child placed a small toy car at the foot of the grave. A red car, Daniel's favorite color. It felt as though time had folded in on itself, the past colliding violently with the present. Evelyn remembered giving her son a red toy car on his 10th birthday, his excitement as he raced it across the dining table, his laughter filling the mansion like sunlight through glass. And now that same toy, or one identical to it, rested at his tombstone, placed there by a stranger's child. As the woman began to stand, Evelyn instinctively stepped back behind the statue, her heart pounding. She didn't want to confront her, not yet. She wanted to understand first. When the woman turned away, Evelyn noticed her name stitched faintly on the apron pocket. Maya. The name burned into her mind. A waitress named Maya. Somewhere she had heard it before. But where? Then it hit her. A vague memory from Daniel's university days. He once mentioned a girl who worked at a small cafe near his campus. A kind waitress who always slipped him extra sugar for his coffee because he was too serious for his age. Evelyn hadn't thought much of it then. Her son had many friends, many admirers. But now standing there in the chill of the cemetery, she wondered if Maya was that girl. As Evelyn walked back to her car, questions circled like vultures in her mind. Why was this woman at her son's grave? Why did the child look like Daniel? And why did she bring the same lilies? The same rare variety only grown at Evelyn's private estate. The rational part of her mind told her it was coincidence, but something deeper, the part that still believed in fate, told her this was no accident. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. Her curiosity had turned into obsession. She searched her foundation's database, the hospital archives, and even the employment records of nearby restaurants. It took hours, but she finally found her. Maya Robinson, 26, single mother, employee at the Blue Star Cafe, a small diner on the edge of town. No family listed, no criminal record, no known associations, just a quiet woman living in a rented apartment with her 4-year-old son, Liam Robinson. Liam. The name made her chest tighten. Her son used to talk about naming his future child Liam. Strong, simple, timeless, he said. Evelyn had laughed back then, calling it a poor man's name. Now that same name echoed in her head, pulling her deeper into the mystery she wasn't sure she wanted to solve. Days passed, and Evelyn found herself driving past the cafe more than once. She told herself it was just curiosity, but deep down she was searching for proof. A gesture, a smile, anything that might confirm her suspicion. And then one afternoon she saw it. Maya was behind the counter, her hair tied neatly, her hands serving coffee to customers. Liam sat at a corner table, drawing on napkins with crayons. When he smiled, Evelyn felt her breath catch again. That same dimple on the left cheek. The same way he tilted his head when concentrating, just like Daniel. Evelyn drove away that day with tears she didn't understand. It wasn't anger or betrayal. It was something more painful. The realization that while she mourned her son, perhaps a piece of him had lived on right under her nose. But the truth, she knew, couldn't stay buried forever. The more she watched Maya from afar, the more questions burned in her soul. Why hadn't the girl come forward? Was she ashamed? Or was she hiding something more dangerous? Something that could destroy the Carter legacy if the world ever found out. As Evelyn's obsession deepened, so did her guilt. She had spent years building monuments to her son, but she had never once considered the quiet lives he might have touched in ways she didn't approve of. And now, standing at the crossroads of grief and revelation, she realized she was no longer just mourning her child. She was about to uncover the story he never had the chance to tell. And with that realization, Evelyn made a silent vow. She would find out who Maya really was, and what secret bound her to the grave of Daniel Carter. Evelyn Carter's nights became longer and her thoughts more dangerous. Sleep eluded her, replaced by whispers of curiosity that clawed at her sanity. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the little boy's face. Those green eyes haunted her, accusing her, questioning her, almost begging her to uncover the truth. By the third sleepless night, Evelyn had made up her mind. She was no longer a grieving mother. She was an investigator, a woman who needed answers more than air. The following morning she arrived at the Blue Star Cafe, hiding behind dark sunglasses and a simple gray coat. It was a place she would never have stepped into under normal circumstances. Small, warm, and far from the world of chandeliers and champagne. The scent of coffee and cinnamon replaced the sterile perfumes of her mansions, and for a brief moment she felt almost human. Maya was there, moving from table to table with practiced grace. Her smile was polite but tired, the kind of expression worn by someone used to serving people who never looked back. Liam sat near the counter, humming to himself while drawing something on paper. Evelyn took a seat at the far end. She pretended to read the menu, though her gaze kept drifting toward the child. He was drawing a picture of a man, a woman, and a child holding hands under a big tree. Above it, in shaky handwriting, he wrote, "My daddy in heaven." Evelyn's throat tightened. She turned the menu upside down to hide the tremor in her hands. When Maya came over, Evelyn quickly lowered her sunglasses. She wasn't ready to be recognized, not yet. Maya's voice was soft, almost musical, but there was pain behind it, a weariness that no one else seemed to notice. As Evelyn watched her, small details began to surface. The way Maya avoided talking about herself. The sadness that shadowed her eyes whenever someone mentioned family. There was something in her demeanor that spoke of secrets too heavy for her young shoulders. That night, Evelyn's curiosity evolved into an obsession she could no longer control. She sent her personal assistant discreetly to dig into Maya's background. Within a day, a file arrived. Employment history, apartment details, even hospital records. But one document stood out like a lightning bolt. A birth certificate. Child's name Liam Robinson. Father Daniel Carter. Mother Maya Robinson. The paper slipped from Evelyn's hands. Her vision blurred. Her heart pounded so violently she thought it might tear through her chest. Her son, her perfect, disciplined golden boy, had fathered a child with a waitress. And no one ever told her. The revelation was both a wound and a miracle. She felt betrayed by Daniel for keeping it a secret, yet an overwhelming forbidden joy stirred within her. Her son had left behind a legacy of life, a heartbeat that still existed in this world. But then came the fear. What if this truth became public? What would the media say? A billionaire heir with a secret child, born to a woman the world would label as unfit, unworthy, and scandalous. Evelyn's empire had taken decades to build. One headline could ruin it all. Still, her heart refused to let go. She needed to see the boy again, to hear his voice, to know him even from afar. So Evelyn began showing up more often. At the park across the cafe, she sat in her car, watching as Maya and Liam played together. The boy's laughter carried through the wind, bright and pure. Sometimes he ran to help strangers pick up fallen things, just as Daniel used to. It wasn't just resemblance, guys, it was spirit. Each visit made Evelyn's guilt heavier. She couldn't stay hidden forever. One afternoon, fate intervened. It started to rain, sharp, sudden, and merciless. People rushed to their cars, but Maya and Liam were caught outside without an umbrella. Evelyn didn't think. She simply acted. She grabbed her umbrella, stepped out of the car, and hurried toward them. For the first time, their eyes met face to face. Maya looked startled, clutching Liam's hand protectively. Evelyn introduced herself under the disguise of kindness, an old woman offering shelter. Maya hesitated, but the child smiled up at Evelyn, instantly trusting her. His small hand touched Evelyn's palm, and something inside her broke open. Warmth, pain, and something dangerously close to love. As they walked to the cafe together, rain dripping down the edges of the umbrella, Evelyn asked small, innocent questions. Maya answered carefully, her tone cautious but polite. She mentioned working double shifts, raising Liam alone, and how she never received help from the father's family. That night, Evelyn sat in her study, surrounded by photos of Daniel. She stared at his portrait, the same green eyes, the same smile. She whispered, "You left me, but you left me a piece of you." Her tears fell freely for the first time in years. The next morning, Evelyn sent a silent donation to the cafe's account, enough to cover a year's rent. She wrote no name, but she couldn't stop there. She began sending gifts anonymously, toys, groceries, clothes, each carefully placed at their doorstep. But secrets have a way of revealing themselves, even when wrapped in kindness. A week later, Maya found one of the delivery slips and traced it back to the Carter Foundation. The realization struck her like thunder. Why would a billionaire charity suddenly care about a waitress and her child? Unless someone had found out, fear took root. Maya started avoiding the cafe's regular routines. She quit one shift, then another, preparing to move away quietly. She couldn't risk losing her son to the powerful family who never wanted them in the first place. Evelyn noticed their sudden absence. Panic set in. The thought of losing them before telling the truth drove her to desperation. She decided to reveal herself, gently, honestly. So one evening, as the sun dipped below the city skyline, Evelyn waited outside the cafe. When Maya appeared holding Liam's hand, Evelyn stepped forward, trembling. She removed her sunglasses, letting the woman see who she truly was. Maya froze. The air between them thickened with shock. Evelyn's reputation preceded her, the billionaire matriarch, the untouchable symbol of power. Evelyn's lips trembled as she whispered, I know who you are. Maya's eyes filled with fear. She pulled Liam closer, instinctively shielding him. She didn't speak, but her trembling said enough. Evelyn's voice cracked as she continued. He's Daniel's child, isn't he? Maya's tears spilled silently. She didn't deny it. She simply looked away as if the truth itself burned too brightly to face. That moment shattered both women. For Evelyn, it was the confirmation of what she already knew, and the beginning of an emotional storm she could never contain. She wanted to hold the child, to love him, to tell him about the father he'd never know. But she also wanted to scream, to demand why no one told her, why she had to find out this way, through secrecy, through shame. Maya's story poured out like confession. Daniel had loved her, truly loved her, but his family's name stood like a wall between them. He had promised to tell his mother, but then the accident happened. She never got the chance. She had raised Liam alone, protecting him from the cruel whispers of a society that saw her as less. Evelyn stood frozen, every word carving guilt deeper into her soul. She thought of all the times she had lectured Daniel about marrying within his class, about preserving the Carter image. Now, that image felt like a curse she'd written with her own hand. But instead of anger, Evelyn felt something else, remorse, raw and consuming. When she looked at Maya, she didn't see a waitress anymore. She saw a woman who had loved her son purely, with no greed, no ambition, only heart. And in that realization, Evelyn found her own redemption. She asked to meet Liam again, not as a billionaire, not as a Carter, but as his grandmother. Maya hesitated, torn between fear and compassion. But Liam's innocent tug on her sleeve made the choice for her. The boy looked up at Evelyn and smiled, saying softly, "You have eyes like my daddy." Evelyn broke. She fell to her knees, tears soaking her cheeks as she pulled the little boy into her arms. It felt like hugging Daniel again, his laughter, his warmth, his life. That night marked the start of something Evelyn hadn't known she needed: forgiveness. She began visiting them quietly, helping from the shadows, guiding Liam's education, paying his school fees anonymously. She never wanted to steal him from his mother, only to be part of his world. But as word spread that the Carter matriarch was frequently seen in a poor neighborhood, whispers began to rise. The media grew curious. The story that could destroy her reputation was about to explode, yet Evelyn no longer cared. Because sometimes the truth, no matter how scandalous, is the only way the heart can finally rest. Keep watching till the end. What happens when the world finds out about Evelyn's secret grandson? And how will society react when the billionaire's legacy takes a turn no one expected? For weeks, Evelyn tried to keep her visits private. Quiet afternoons at the park, short visits to Maya's apartment with gifts for Liam. She had finally found peace in the simplicity of those moments. For the first time in years, her smile wasn't staged for cameras. Her laughter wasn't rehearsed, but peace is a fragile thing. And in a world where every billionaire breathes under a spotlight, secrets don't stay buried long. It began with a single photograph. A journalist snapped a shot of Evelyn stepping out of her car in a rundown neighborhood, carrying a grocery bag. Another caught her holding a small child's hand outside a cafe. Within hours, gossip sites exploded. Billionaire Evelyn Carter spotted in slum area, secret charity or secret family. Who is the mysterious black woman and her child with the Carter matriarch? The news spread like wildfire. By morning, her name was trending on every platform. TV anchors speculated, social media buzzed, and shareholders demanded explanations. Evelyn's phone rang endlessly, her board members, lawyers, friends, all terrified that her spotless image was about to crumble. Inside her mansion, Evelyn sat motionless as the television flashed her face alongside Maya's. They called Maya the waitress who trapped a billionaire heir. They called Liam the illegitimate Carter. Each headline felt like a knife. Outside the cafe, reporters swarmed, flashing cameras at Maya as she tried to shield Liam. Her quiet life had turned into a circus overnight. She closed the cafe early, trembling as strangers shouted cruel questions she didn't deserve. Evelyn watched the chaos unfold from her living room, her chest tight with rage and guilt. She had built an empire that valued image over humanity, and now, that empire was destroying the only two people she truly cared about. That evening, Her publicist begged her to release a statement denying everything, to call it a misunderstanding and a charitable connection. But Evelyn knew denial would be another form of betrayal. She had hidden behind silence all her life. Silence when Daniel begged for freedom. Silence when her own pride pushed him away. Silence when he died without her forgiveness. She would not hide now. The next morning, Evelyn made a decision that would shock the world. She called for a press conference. The grand ballroom of the Carter Hotel filled with journalists, photographers, and flashing lights. The air crackled with anticipation. Everyone expected the billionaire to clear her name, to distance herself from the rumors. But when Evelyn walked in, there was no armor of power in her eyes, and only truth. She stood before the microphones, her posture still regal, but her voice carried a trembling strength that silenced the room. "For years," she began, "I've lived believing that wealth could protect me from pain, from judgment, from loss. But standing here today, I realize money can't shield the heart from its own mistakes." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Cameras zoomed in. "The woman you've seen in the photographs, Amaya Robinson, is not a stranger to my family. She was loved by my son, Daniel Carter, and the child, the boy you've called illegitimate, is my grandson." A gasp tore through the room. The journalists froze. The room erupted in flashes as every camera turned to capture her confession. "Yes," Evelyn continued, her voice firm despite the tremor. "Daniel loved Maya, but my pride, my obsession with reputation, kept me from knowing them. I never gave my son the space to love freely, and when he died, I thought I had lost him forever, until the day I saw that little boy at his grave, and realized Daniel had left behind a piece of himself." Her eyes glistened as she spoke. "You can write your headlines. You can mock me for my mistakes. But don't you dare call that boy illegitimate. He is Daniel Carter's son, and mine by heart." The silence that followed was thunderous. Even the reporters trained to chase scandals felt the weight of her words. The next day, the internet erupted again. But this time, the tone had shifted. Some mocked her vulnerability. Others, however, called it the most powerful confession of the decade. People shared clips of her speech with captions like, "Even billionaires can have hearts," but not everyone was forgiving. The Carter board convened an emergency meeting. Shareholders accused her of jeopardizing the company's reputation. Some demanded her resignation. Old rivals saw an opportunity to tear her down. Evelyn faced them calmly. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. She simply said, "If protecting the Carter name means disowning my blood, then it's a name I no longer deserve to carry." She signed over her position as CEO that very day. For the first time, she walked out of her own building not as a billionaire, but as a mother who had finally chosen love over legacy. Meanwhile, Maya stayed hidden, overwhelmed by the chaos. Reporters camped outside her home. Her cafe was vandalized with cruel words like gold digger and scandal. She wanted to run, to take Liam and disappear, but she had nowhere to go. Then one night, there was a knock on her door. When she opened it, Evelyn stood there, no bodyguards, no cameras, just an old woman holding a small box. Inside was a silver locket, Daniel's childhood photo on one side, Liam's on the other. "I gave up everything," Evelyn said softly, "but I'd do it again just to have this moment." Maya's tears fell freely. Years of struggle, judgment, and fear washed away in silence. From that night on, Evelyn stayed with them. She cooked for Liam, helped Maya reopen the cafe, and found peace in the laughter that filled the tiny apartment. But the world wasn't done watching. A month later, an invitation arrived. The annual Carter Foundation Gala, hosted by the new board members. It was Daniel's memorial night, an event Evelyn had started years ago, now being held without her. Maya urged her not to go, but Evelyn smiled. "This was built in Daniel's name. I'm not hiding anymore." When she entered the grand hall, every head turned. Cameras clicked. The whispers returned, cruel, curious, judgmental. At the center of the stage was Daniel's portrait, framed in gold. Evelyn walked toward it, her heels echoing against marble. Her heart steady, she placed a small bouquet of lilies beneath the portrait, the same lilies she had once carried to his grave, and beside them, she placed Liam's toy car. The audience watched in stunned silence. Then, from the crowd, a soft voice broke the stillness. "Grandma, you forgot this." It was Liam running across the stage, his tiny hands holding a crayon drawing, the same picture of 3 people under a tree. He handed it to Evelyn, who smiled through her tears. The cameras flashed again, but this time it wasn't scandal they captured. It was redemption. Evelyn lifted the boy into her arms, turned toward the audience, and said quietly, "My legacy isn't in my company, my wealth, or my name. It's in this child and in the love my son left behind." The room erupted into applause. Some clapped out of respect, others out of awe. But for Evelyn, it didn't matter. She had already won the only battle that ever mattered, against her own pride. That night, headlines changed tone across the world. Billionaire walks away from empire to embrace. Her grandson, humanity wins over status. From fortune to forgiveness, the Carter family's emotional redemption. Her fall had become her rise, and her shame had turned into strength. Stay till the end, because what Evelyn does next will melt even the coldest hearts. One final twist remains, the moment when everything she lost finally finds its purpose. Months passed since the night Evelyn Carter stood before the world and traded her empire for the truth. The scandal that once threatened to destroy her name eventually faded into something more powerful. A story of redemption. Her mansion, once filled with marble silence, now echoed with the sound of crayons on walls, tiny footsteps on polished floors, and laughter that didn't care about chandeliers. The house had transformed from a palace into a home. Maya had moved in temporarily, though Evelyn insisted it was permanent. They shared meals around a small table in the kitchen, not the grand dining hall. Evelyn learned to cook again, clumsily but earnestly, laughing every time the smoke alarm went off. For the first time, she didn't need servants or photographers, just family. Every morning, Evelyn walked Liam to preschool. She loved watching him wave goodbye. His little backpack bouncing, his laughter echoing through the gates. Other parents whispered, the former billionaire mingling among ordinary people. But Evelyn no longer flinched. She had traded luxury for something priceless. Maya, too, found new strength. Her cafe, once vandalized and nearly ruined, became a symbol of resilience. After Evelyn's confession, people flooded to support it. Articles described it as the cafe that taught a billionaire to love. Within months, Maya expanded it into a community space for single mothers and struggling students. Evelyn often sat at the corner table, sipping plain coffee. No more gold-trimmed cups, no imported beans. She watched Maya manage the shop with quiet pride, seeing in her the courage she wished she'd had when she was young. One afternoon, a journalist who had once chased her for scandal came by to interview Maya. When asked if she had forgiven Evelyn, Maya smiled softly and said, "Forgiveness isn't about forgetting what hurt you. It's about recognizing that love is greater than pride." Evelyn didn't just accept her grandson, she accepted me. That's more than forgiveness. That's family. Those words reached millions online. The clip went viral not for drama, but for its truth. People around the world began sharing their own stories of reconciliation. Hashtags flooded the internet. Here, love over legacy. Forgive like Evelyn, who once built empires out of marble and money, had unknowingly built a movement, one rooted in humanity. A year later, on a warm spring morning, Evelyn found herself standing at Daniel's grave again. The lilies swayed in the breeze, sunlight dancing across the marble inscription. But this time she wasn't alone. Liam stood beside her, clutching a small bunch of wildflowers he'd picked himself. Maya held his other hand, her eyes peaceful. Evelyn knelt, brushing her fingers across her son's name. Her voice trembled but carried no sorrow. "You once told me you wanted to live a life filled with love, Daniel. I never understood it then, but your son taught me what you meant." Liam placed his flowers on the grave and whispered, "Bye, Daddy." The simplicity of that gesture broke Evelyn's heart and mended it all at once. As they turned to leave, Evelyn noticed something carved faintly into the back of the tombstone. Words Daniel had once written in his journal. "Love is the only legacy that survives us." She smiled through her tears. He had left her one last message and one final lesson, a new beginning later that year. Maya officially rebranded her cafe as Liam's Table. The opening day drew hundreds of visitors, from journalists to former employees of the Carter Corporation who had come just to say thank you. But the real surprise was when Evelyn stood on stage to make an announcement. She revealed she had sold the remainder of her assets: the Carter estate, the luxury vehicles, the art collections, and established a new foundation, the Daniel and Liam Hope Foundation. Its purpose: to fund education and childcare for underprivileged families, with a special focus on single mothers, a cause inspired by Maya's journey. "For years I thought power came from wealth," she said to the crowd. "Now I know it comes from love, the kind that rebuilds what pride once destroyed." Applause thundered through the room. Even the journalists who had once mocked her wiped their eyes. Maya stood beside her, tears glimmering in her smile. Liam clapped his tiny hands, unaware he had become the symbol of something far bigger than himself. The final moments. Months passed since the night Evelyn Carter stood before the world and traded her empire for the truth. The scandal that once threatened to destroy her name eventually faded into something more powerful: a story of redemption. Her mansion, once filled with marble silence, now echoed with the sound of crayons on walls, tiny footsteps on polished floors, and laughter that didn't care about chandeliers. The house had transformed from a palace into a home. Maya had moved in temporarily, though Evelyn insisted it was permanent. They shared meals around a small table in the kitchen, not the grand dining hall. Evelyn learned to cook again, clumsily but earnestly, laughing every time the smoke alarm went off. For the first time, she didn't need servants or photographers, and just family. Every morning, Evelyn walked Liam to preschool. She loved watching him wave goodbye, his little backpack bouncing, his laughter echoing through the gates. Other parents whispered, the former billionaire mingling among ordinary people. But Evelyn no longer flinched. She had traded luxury for something priceless. Maya, too, found new strength. Her cafe, once vandalized and nearly ruined, became a symbol of resilience. After Evelyn's confession, people flooded to support it. Articles described it as the cafe that taught a billionaire to love. Within months, Maya expanded it into a community space for single mothers and struggling students. Evelyn often sat at the corner table, sipping plain coffee. No more gold-trimmed cups, no imported beans. She watched Maya manage the shop with quiet pride, seeing in her the courage she wished she'd had when she was young. One afternoon, a journalist who had once chased her for scandal came by to interview Maya. When asked if she had forgiven Evelyn, Maya smiled softly and said, "Forgiveness isn't about forgetting what hurt you. It's about recognizing that love is greater than pride." Evelyn didn't just accept her grandson, she accepted me. That's more than forgiveness. That's family. Those words reached millions online. The clip went viral, not for drama, but for its truth. People around the world began sharing their own stories of reconciliation. Hashtags flooded the internet. Cheers love over legacy. Forgive like Evelyn, who once built empires out of marble and money, had unknowingly built a movement, one rooted in humanity. A year later, on a warm spring morning, Evelyn found herself standing at Daniel's grave again. The lilies swayed in the breeze, sunlight dancing across the marble inscription. But this time she wasn't alone. Liam stood beside her, clutching a small bunch of wildflowers he'd picked himself. Maya held his other hand, her eyes peaceful. Evelyn knelt, brushing her fingers across her son's name. Her voice trembled but carried no sorrow. "You once told me you wanted to live a life filled with love, Daniel. I never understood it then, but your son taught me what you meant." Liam placed his flowers on the grave and whispered, "Bye, Daddy." The simplicity of that gesture broke Evelyn's heart and mended it all at once. As they turned to leave, Evelyn noticed something carved faintly into the back of the tombstone, words Daniel had once written in his journal. "Love is the only legacy that survives us." She smiled through her tears. He had left her one last message, one final lesson. A new beginning later that year, Maya officially rebranded her cafe as Liam's Table. The opening day drew hundreds of visitors, from journalists to former employees of the Carter Corporation, who had come just to say thank you. But the real surprise was when Evelyn stood on stage to make an announcement. She revealed she had sold the remainder of her assets: the Carter estate, the luxury vehicles, the art collections, and established a new foundation, the Daniel and Liam Hope Foundation. Its purpose: to fund education and childcare for underprivileged families, with a special focus on single mothers, a cause inspired by Maya's journey. "For years I thought power came from wealth," she said to the crowd. Now I know it comes from love, the kind that rebuilds what pride once destroyed. Applause thundered through the room. Even the journalists who had once mocked her wiped their eyes. Maya stood beside her, tears glimmering in her smile. Liam clapped his tiny hands, unaware he had become the symbol of something far bigger than himself. The final moments. That night, Evelyn sat alone on her porch, the soft hum of crickets filling the air. Maya was putting Liam to bed inside, reading him a story. From the window, Evelyn could see them. The glow of the lamp, the gentle sway of Maya's voice, the warmth of a family she had nearly lost before she even knew it existed. She looked up at the stars, whispering, "You see, Daniel? I finally did something right." A gentle wind brushed her face as if answering her. Evelyn leaned back, her eyes closing peacefully. The world outside still debated, still speculated, still gossiped, but none of that mattered anymore. She had found redemption not in wealth, but in forgiveness. The next morning, the world woke to another headline, but this one wasn't about scandal. Evelyn Carter passes, peacefully at home, leaves entire fortune to foundation supporting single mothers. The article described her final years not as a fall from grace, but as a rise into humanity. At the funeral, hundreds gathered, business leaders, journalists, ordinary people she'd helped, and children whose lives were changed by her foundation. Maya stood beside the coffin holding Liam's hand. When it was time to speak, she stepped forward, her voice steady but soft. Evelyn Carter taught me that sometimes people don't change because they're perfect. They change because they're broken. And when they rebuild themselves with love, the cracks become the most beautiful part of who they are. Liam placed a small red toy car on the coffin, the same one he once left at his father's grave. "So Daddy and Grandma can play together in heaven," he whispered. Tears rolled down every face in the room. Even those who had once doubted Evelyn's sincerity now saw her truth. A woman who had turned her shame into grace and her fortune into forgiveness. Years later, Liam's table grew into a nationwide chain, each branch donating profits to children's charities. Maya became an inspiration, featured in documentaries and books. But she never forgot where it began, one rainy day in a cemetery, when grief met fate. In the cafe's main hall, a mural stretched across the wall, Evelyn, Daniel, Maya, and little Liam under a tree, the same one from his childhood drawing. Beneath it read the quote that had changed their lives. "Love is the only legacy that survives us." Visitors from all walks of life stopped to take photos, to cry, to believe in hope again, and every year, on the anniversary of Daniel's death, Maya and Liam returned to that quiet cemetery with lilies in hand. Liam, now taller, still carried the red toy car, faded but sacred. He would place it gently by the grave and whisper, "We kept your promise, Daddy." The wind would rustle the leaves, and for a moment, it always felt like the world paused to listen.